The day before the wedding, my fiancée posted a picture on Instagram of her and her first love lying on the bed, partially dressed. There were a few clear signs of what had happened scattered on the floor. I couldn't help but comment, "Great pic. Guess we've got the theme for tomorrow's wedding." Then I grabbed a suitcase and started shoving all her stuff into it, like I was giving it away for free. The reason Sophie felt bold enough to post that photo on Instagram just a day before our wedding was that she believed my unwavering devotion meant I wouldn't dare to call off the wedding, even after seeing her with another man. She thought I would forgive her without hesitation because of how deeply I loved her. So much so that I had lost all sense of dignity. But she seemed to forget that. She once told me, "Kyle, even if I mess around with others, it will never be real. My first time will always be yours." Yet in that photo, there were obvious signs of what had happened between her and Ethan. First time? It seemed she had long since lost count of how many first times she'd had. Suddenly, clarity struck me. If she and Ethan were so in love, then so be it. There was no longer any need for this wedding. At 10 o'clock, I switched my phone back on. Dozens of missed calls flooded in, along with a barrage of messages from Sophie. As soon as my phone booted up, she called. "Kyle, what's going on? It's 10 o'clock, and you're still not here for the wedding? Do you know how embarrassing this is for me? You better prepare double the gift money. My bridesmaids are going to be furious. Do you even want to marry me anymore?" I put it on speakerphone and said, "And you need to apologize to me first, and then to the bridesmaids." In the past, I would have responded gently and complied with her demands, but now I didn't care anymore. I sarcastically retorted, "Sophie, are those marks on your neck going to disappear by today? You spent last night with Ethan. How much concealer will you need to cover those up?" "Sophie, today's wedding is canceled." She laughed coldly. "Oh, so you saw my Instagram? Is this your way of getting back at me on our wedding day? You've been watching too much TV, Kyle," she said sharply. "If my parents weren't forcing me to marry you, do you think I would? The one I love is Ethan. You may have my body, but never my heart. Don't think you can use last night against me. I'm giving you one last chance. Get here by 11 or forget about this wedding." With that, she hung up. I could imagine her fuming with her bridesmaids about how to deal with me when I arrived. Just then, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was a picture of Sophie sleeping in Ethan's arms. Although she was covered by a blanket, the marks on her neck and her blissful expression made it clear what had happened. Ethan texted, "She's marrying you today." But last night was truly her wedding night. I took a screenshot of Sophie's Instagram post along with Ethan's photo and shared them both on my own Instagram with the caption, "Wedding canceled." Clearly, childhood sweethearts are more suited for each other. My phone immediately exploded with calls from friends and family asking what was going on. With our wedding scheduled for noon and already being half an hour past 10 o'clock, canceling at this point was no small matter. Sophie's parents also called me, asking anxiously on the other end of the line, "Kyle, what's going on? Why aren't you here yet? I heard from Sophie's bridesmaids that you two had a fight and want to cancel the wedding. Marriage is a big deal. You can't just mess around with it like this." I remained silent. I couldn't bring myself to say anything rude to my elders, but deep down, I no longer wanted to be entangled with Sophie. Once I had woken up to the truth, I seemed to have turned to stone. I softly said, "Professor, I'm not throwing a tantrum or fighting." "Sir, I'm not throwing a tantrum or fighting. It's just that Sophie has always loved Ethan, not me. You can see it for yourself on her Instagram. Sophie's father was my university professor, and it was through him that I met Sophie. He had always treated me very well. One reason I tolerated Sophie so much was because of him. I thought to myself, how could a child of such a good teacher turn out this way? It must just be a momentary lapse of judgment." But I realized I was wrong. You can't force someone to love you. The professor and his wife didn't like Ethan. In college, Ethan had gone to great lengths to pursue Sophie, flattering her in every way. But it was all just so he could establish himself in this city. He instigated Sophie to fight with her parents, asking them to help him get a spot to stay on campus so he could marry her and take care of her. Ethan's grades were terrible, and there was no way he could stay on campus. I, on the other hand, had gone from master's to PhD under the professor's guidance, winning national scholarships. Along the way, I had published countless articles. The school decided to give that year's stay-on-campus spot to me. Ethan and Sophie said it was because of my interference that he couldn't stay. But he had just graduated with a bachelor's degree. Could the school possibly let him stay? Yet Sophie believed this nonsensical explanation, convinced that I had snatched the spot from Ethan's hands. In the new house, I finished sorting through all of Sophie's things, packing them into several suitcases. I was just about to call the moving company when Sophie came rushing out of the elevator, still in her wedding dress. "Kyle, are you done with your tantrum? If so, come with me to the hotel. All our guests are waiting." Looking at her anxious face, I smiled. "Sophie, wasn't last night your wedding night with Ethan already?" She froze for a moment, and I sneered. "I've already informed our friends and family that the wedding is canceled. I wish you and Ethan a happy life together," Sophie exclaimed. "Kyle, have you thought about my parents? They're your professors. Do you have no conscience? Can't you see how embarrassed they'll be at their age to face this?" I took a deep breath and replied, "Oh, when you were shamelessly doing those things, did you ever think about how embarrassed your parents would be? You even posted intimate photos with Ethan online. What else is there to be embarrassed about?" She glared at me fiercely and gritted her teeth. "Fine. I'll promise to have less contact with Ethan in the future. Is that good enough for you? Don't be so unreasonable. Who doesn't have ex-boyfriends or ex-girlfriends before getting married? I was just going to say goodbye to my past love. After all, I was going to marry you today. You're making a big deal out of nothing." Looking at her disdainful face directed at me, I truly regretted the past few years. Why did I ever fall in love with such a person? I showed her the photo Ethan had sent. "I'm not so in love with you that I've let you walk all over me. I'm not going to marry you with a smile while you cheat on me. I've packed your things. You might as well take them with you. Otherwise, I'll have the cleaning staff throw them out." With that, I pushed the suitcases out and slammed the door in her face. Sophie shouted at the door, "Kyle, don't you dare regret this." I ignored her outburst and closed the bedroom door, allowing myself to finally get some sleep. The next day, when I turned my phone back on, it nearly froze from the flood of messages from concerned friends and family. I replied to a few important ones, but then I saw a message from Sophie's father, my professor, urging me to come over as soon as I could. Thinking of how kindly he and his wife had treated me over the years, I felt a pang of guilt and decided to visit them. As soon as I walked in, I found Sophie sitting on the couch with her neck stiff and her expression defiant. "Kyle, didn't you say you weren't getting married? What's the point of convincing my parents to pressure me now? Can't you have any shame?" Professor Smith stood up and said, "Enough, Sophie. Is this how I've raised you? You're disappointing me greatly." Sophie shot back, "I'm my own person with my own thoughts. I'm not a puppet that you can control. Just because you want me to like someone doesn't mean I will. I've only ever loved Ethan," she continued. "Kyle is the one who doesn't want to marry me now, not me." Calling off the wedding. Why blame me? Isn't Kyle the good son-in-law you wanted? Tears filled her mother's eyes as she said, "Sophie, look at what you've done. How can you expect Kyle to handle this? How could you and Ethan do such things?" Sophie gritted her teeth and glared at me. "Even if I agree to marry you, my heart doesn't belong to you. My body and soul have always been Ethan's." Feeling hopeless, I stepped in front of the professor and his wife, looking directly at Sophie. I asked, "When I pursued you, did I ever force you to do anything against your will? Did I pressure you when I proposed? This relationship has always been based on your consent. Why now claim that it's me or your parents who are pressuring you? I thought I was a good boyfriend all these years, but I never expected you would view our relationship this way." The professor's hands trembled with anger. "You keep saying you love Ethan. Do you even know what kind of person he is? What he has done? You're clearly under some kind of spell." Sophie looked defiant as she faced her parents. "You did those things to Ethan without him blaming you. He just told me not to be angry with you. And yet here you're criticizing him. You're the ones with no conscience." Her mother slammed her hand on the table. "What have we done?" Sophie scoffed. "Do we really need to go over this? You took Ethan's spot at school and gave it to Kyle. Kyle, don't pretend everyone knows your spot was earned by sucking up to my dad." The professor clutched his chest, gasping for breath. "What did you say? I've lived my life honestly. And now my own daughter accuses me of using underhanded tactics for a student. Sophie stood up dramatically and declared, "Isn't that true? If it weren't for being your daughter and Ethan encouraging me, I would have reported Kyle long ago." The professor turned pale and pointed at her. "Good. I raised a wonderful daughter. Go ahead and report me now. Get out. Get out. You'll regret this." Sophie shot back as she stormed out. "Just watch. I'll make sure Ethan gets what he deserves." With that, she slammed the door behind her. As the sound of the door echoed through the room, the professor collapsed. "Professor!" After the professor collapsed, the room descended into chaos. I stood there, frozen, as Sophie's mother rushed to help him, trying to get him to breathe normally again. The anger I felt was mingled with guilt. But before I could say anything, Sophie turned towards me, her face full of fury. "This is your fault," she screamed, pointing at me like I was the sole cause of all the destruction. I wanted to argue back, to tell her she was the one who caused all of this by cheating, lying, and manipulating, but I kept my mouth shut. There was nothing more to say, at least not at that moment. I walked out of the house, leaving the weight of my decision hanging heavily in the air. That was the final end between Sophie and me, or so I thought. In the days that followed, I moved into a small apartment. The wedding was officially off, but the drama didn't end there. Sophie, clearly furious that I had taken control of the situation and exposed her affair, began a campaign on social media to defame me. She constantly posted about how I had manipulated her, controlled her, and even stolen Ethan's future by taking the campus spot that he supposedly deserved. With every post she made, my anger grew. She twisted the truth in such a cruel way, and I received messages of support from some friends, but also from strangers attacking me, believing her version of events. Sophie didn't just destroy what we had. She was trying to destroy my reputation, my career, and my name. Worst of all, she was using her parents, who were devastated, to garner sympathy, claiming I was the reason for her father's health crisis. Without me realizing it, Sophie started to involve lawyers. I was called into a meeting at work to discuss concerns about my personal behavior. It turned out Sophie had sent a letter to the university where I worked and studied, alleging that I had plagiarized parts of my academic work and earned the scholarship unfairly through favoritism from her father. Of course, the university had to investigate, and I was suspended during the process. Losing my academic position was a devastating blow, but I wasn't about to let Sophie destroy everything I had built. I gathered evidence, emails, papers, correspondences that showed my academic trajectory had been earned fairly. But the damage was done. The accusations spread, and parts of the academic community began to look at me with suspicion. As I fought to clear my name, things only got worse. Sophie, not satisfied with tarnishing me on social media and in my workplace, began reaching out to my family. My parents, who initially supported me, started receiving calls and visits from Sophie. With her perfect acting, she convinced my mother that I had emotionally traumatized her, claiming I had pressured her into marriage by manipulating her through her father. My mother, who had always believed in the sanctity of marriage, started doubting me. Sophie had turned my family against me, and suddenly, I found myself completely alone. Then she struck in the most cruel way possible. Sophie showed up at my apartment one rainy morning, claiming she was pregnant. She looked at me with a cold smile and said, "I've thought about it, and despite everything, I'm going to raise this child. Ethan and I have decided, but everyone's going to know you're the biological father." I was completely stunned. How could she be pregnant with my child? We hadn't been together in months before everything fell apart. Then the truth hit me. It was another one of her manipulations. She planned to drag me into legal and financial hell, forcing me to pay child support and further ruining my personal and professional life. I didn't know what to do. The pressure was becoming unbearable, but I decided to consult a lawyer. He was blunt. If she took this to court, I would have to prove I wasn't the father. It would be her word against mine, and that wouldn't be enough. We'd need to request a paternity test, but until then, my reputation would remain in jeopardy. While the drama unfolded, I began investigating Sophie and Ethan's past. I discovered that Ethan had been using Sophie the entire time, He wasn't interested in building a family with her. He was after her family's money and academic connections. He saw Sophie as a tool, something to use and discard. And Sophie, blinded by her obsession with him, would do anything for his fake love. I decided I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I filed a defamation lawsuit against Sophie and Ethan, gathering evidence of how they were trying to destroy my life. The paternity test was conducted, and as I already knew, I wasn't the father. In court, Sophie and Ethan were exposed for the liars and manipulators they were. The judge not only dismissed the paternity claim, but also ordered Sophie to pay me damages for the emotional and financial harm she had caused. In the end, Sophie lost everything. Her reputation was in ruins. Her parents sided with me after realizing how she had behaved, and Ethan, who had tried to use her, disappeared once the money ran out. She ended up alone, while I slowly rebuilt my life, but not without scars. The most infuriating moment came when Sophie, with nothing and no one left, tried to contact me again. "Kyle," she said, "I made a mistake. Can we start over? I've always really loved you. I was just confused." The only response I could give was to shut the door in her face, with a smile of relief. After the trial, where everything was finally exposed and Sophie and Ethan were ordered to pay damages, I moved on with my life. Although it was an extremely difficult period, I decided that I wouldn't let that chapter define me. Sophie had tried to destroy everything I had built, but she failed. And so, I focused on what really mattered: my career, my personal life, and my future. Returning to work after the suspension was tough, but with the support of colleagues and the truth about Sophie's lies coming to light, I regained my academic position and slowly rebuilt my reputation at the university. I continued publishing my research, and with each achievement, I felt stronger. Every success helped me leave behind the shadow Sophie had cast over my life. About 2 years after all that chaos, I met Camila. She was unlike anyone I had ever met. Smart, kind, and above all, respectful. From the start, she treated me with an honesty I hadn't realized I needed, and the time we spent together made me understand how healthy relationships could be uplifting. Camila always supported my career and my projects, but she also reminded me to balance my work with moments of rest and relaxation, something I had neglected for years. We grew together, both personally and professionally. With her by my side, not only did I improve at work, but I also began to embrace new opportunities. We were able to buy a house together, and eventually we got married. Our relationship was everything Sophie and I could never have had, based on mutual respect, trust, and true partnership. I thought my story with Sophie was completely over, but about 4 years after the end of our relationship, I was blindsided by another legal notification. Sophie was attempting to sue me for emotional compensation. She claimed that the time we spent together, and the fact that I had supposedly promised her a future, justified her receiving financial support, even though we had no children or legal connection. It was ridiculous, but knowing Sophie, I wasn't entirely surprised. This time, I was prepared. My lawyer laughed when she saw the notification, and we quickly put together our defense. In court, it became clear to everyone that Sophie was desperate. She no longer had her family's support. They had cut ties after learning the full truth about her manipulations. Ethan had abandoned her as soon as it became clear she no longer had access to her family's money. Sophie, unemployed and with no allies, was trying any way she could to drag me down again. The judge didn't take her claims seriously. With all the evidence and documentation on my side, the case was dismissed swiftly, and Sophie didn't get a single penny. That was the last time I heard from her. Later, I learned through mutual acquaintances that Sophie was living a completely different life from the one she had once dreamed of. With no support from her parents, she was living in a friend's apartment and barely scraping by with odd jobs. Her family, once influential and close-knit, had distanced themselves completely after the shame she brought on them. It was sad in a way, but at the same time, I knew these were the consequences of her own actions. Life had caught up with her. Meanwhile, my life was heading in the opposite direction. With Camila by my side, my career flourished even more. I became a respected name in my academic field, and my papers gained international recognition. My work opened doors for consulting and speaking engagements around the world. The support of a partner who respected me, believed in my worth, and helped me grow made all the difference. With Camila, I learned that a healthy relationship is about much more than romantic love. It's about respect, mutual support, and constant growth. One evening, while we were having dinner, Camila looked into my eyes and said, "I'm so proud of the man you are and everything we've built together. I'm sure the best is yet to come." Her words touched me deeply because they summed up exactly how I felt. We had come so far together, and I knew that with her, the sky was the limit. Looking back now, I realized that everything that happened, as painful as it was, brought me to where I am today. Sophie was a dark chapter in my life, but finding someone like Camila showed me that being with someone who respects you can take you so far. Today, I live the life I've always wanted, free from the ghosts of the past, surrounded by love and prosperity.